Hi, welcome to With Respect, the show where we talk about stuff in martial arts people wouldn't normally talk about in the dojang for fear of being seen as disrespectful. Today I've got a guest with me who is a friend of mine from squad training. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Francis. I'm originally from Telford, but I've lived in Birmingham long enough to care. Also lived in Liverpool for a few years as well, so you could probably tell from my accent. In terms of my background, I have been doing taekwondo since 2007, on and off. I've trained at quite a few dojangs across Birmingham and trained at a few in Liverpool. Um, and Yeah, it's been part of my life. I haven't done any other martial arts per se, but I have trained with people who have done other fighting styles. I've trained with guys who've done a bit of Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu and boxing and kickboxing. One of my best mates, actually, he's done Wing Chun. He's done a bit of boxing as well. Um, and yeah, some of my other best friends, as I said, have done kickboxing and karate. So as I said, I've been doing it now for since 2007. Um, Currently a squad member at my association, which I've been now for the past year after having a few years off. And yeah, the future is looking bright. I'm just looking to try and compete as much as I can. Obviously, I'm just nursing an injury which I picked up in May, which well, it's been a setback, but I'm just trying to get back into the grand scheme of things, and just, as I was saying to you before, keeping my ego in check when it comes to training, and just making sure that I'm, you know, taking things slowly but surely.
You've never been much of a ego lifter from what I can see. You manage to execute your power lifts pretty much flawlessly. So as long
Oh
as we can
yeah,
apply that
yeah,
to taekwondo as well, then I feel like you'll be fine.
yeah, yeah. So Georgia says, just what I was to say, that that's my other thing as well. So aside from taekwondo, I do like going to the gym. I've been going to the gym as long as I have been doing taekwondo as well. Um, and even then, with the gyms, like a lot of people, I've trained at different gyms. I've had different training partners and stuff like that.
Everyone comes onto the show with a bit of a concept of something they want to discuss. So we were
Yep.
talking about your dissertation and the concept behind how it plays into philosophy and modern day and martial
Yeah.
arts. So
Yeah.
explain the premise, because a dissertation, I didn't go to university, but the idea is you have like a concept you're trying to either prove or evidence, right?
Right. Yeah. So basically, a dissertation is kind of like its own separate module from uni. So it can be in your last year at uni. So I know, obviously, my course that I did sports studies at Liverpool Hope University, and my course was like for 3 years. Obviously, there's other courses that could be more than that. Some courses have dissertation, some actually have like placement, where basically it's basically work experience. Anyways, so with the dissertation, like you said, it's kind of like an investigative piece of work. I'll start from the beginning. When I was in my first year at uni, my lecturer, the legend that is Joe Rookwood, he said to me and the rest of the class, he said, like, this would be the perfect time to have an idea of what you want your dissertation to be. It could be on anything which is related to the course. So we were doing like sports psychology, sports development, history, and sociology, PE, etc. So anything within the realm of that. So initially I was going to do my dissertation on football because, as you know, Georgia, I'm a big football fan and I'm a big Liverpool supporter. And I was actually going to talk about, like, um kind of like a sociology standpoint in terms of football fandom, especially with Liverpool and stuff like that. When I was at uni, my love for taekwondo really blossomed. In fact, my instructor said something that will always stick with me. He goes that the very first time I trained with him in Liverpool, he said to me, he goes, Francis, see me, I don't like taekwondo. I love taekwondo. And that stuck with me ever since. And as I was training more and more, I was really getting into taekwondo. I was like, because I've always had an interest in martial arts. I've always loved martial arts. I've always wanted to do it, just never got around to doing it when I was younger for certain reasons, which, if you want to go into, we can. Um, And it wasn't until, as I said, I was 17, I finally had the opportunity to do so. So when I was doing it, I was really enjoying it. I was really loving it. And, a lot of it ties back to movies and video games that I used to play as well. So I already had an idea about Taekwondo. I had an idea of the history of Taekwondo. And I thought to myself, you know what? Why not do something on Taekwondo? Because it's a, you know, it's something that really hasn't been touched upon. Martial arts in general hasn't been touched upon in sports. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to do something within it. So initially, I was going to talk about the history of Taekwondo and how popular it's become and how martial arts has become popular. And that was something that was the first original concept of my dissertation. And then when I got to my second year, I had another lecturer. His name was Andy, and for the love of God, I forgot his last name. But he was again similar to Joel in that he was a sport development and history lecturer. And I remember speaking to him towards the end of my second year at uni, and I was telling him the ideas that I had for my dissertation, and he was like very intrigued and said it was interesting, but he was kind of guiding me towards what the dissertation would eventually become. And that was, like, as I said, looking towards the philosophies, the values of Taekwondo and martial arts in general. Is that still relevant in today's modern society, especially considering a lot of stuff that's been going on in this crazy old world? And I thought to myself, you know what, that's actually not a bad idea, because I was going to be very generic, even though, again, it's super rare, oxymoron could be, but as I said, I was just going to focus pure on the on how popular it had become. But I thought that would be a very good concept to use because it opens a lot of questions in the future. So with dissertations, obviously you have obviously your dissertation, you make your investigations, you do your methodology in terms of your speaking to test subjects, etc., and then you come up with the results and then your recommendations. So that question in itself opened the floodgates for any other questions related to Taekwondo and related to the philosophies and other things like politics, money, corruption, blah blah blah, etc. So that's what it did. I For the last 2 to 3 weeks of my summer holidays, leading up to my third year, I did a bit of research. My lecturer Andy, he helped me, gave me a few books to read on, and I did my own investigation on my own reading as well. Got a few books from Google Scholar and Google Books, if you ever heard of it.
A little bit.
Um, Yes, that was something that was quite prevalent. We also had our own internal database of journal articles called Sports Discus. So I was just basically just had a little gander through them, had a few, a quick read through them, and I thought, okay, I've got an idea and everything like that. So coming to my third year, we did what's like a proposal. So obviously my proposal was, is the values and the philosophies of Taekwondo still relevant, as you said, in modern society? At this time now, my main lecturer was a guy named Liam O'Callaghan, who I would say was quite influential in how I view things politically. But we're not going to that because, yeah.
That's up to you,
Anyways,
whatever you want to say.
but no, he liked the idea, and again, he was very supportive, and yeah. So basically, what the dissertation entailed was a brief history of martial arts in general, martial arts in the UK. I mean, I looked at things I even know, like for example, there was a fighting style in this country called Batistu, and for the life of me, I forgot the guy's name. It was William something, and I feel so bad. But basically, he did, I believe it was either judo or jiu-jitsu, and he did a bit of fencing as well. And he basically fused these elements of these fighting styles and created his own fighting style called Batitsu, which kind of became very popular. It's actually got a very good cult following. So I went and did a little bit of investigation on that. Obviously, the introduction of Taekwondo in this country. I delved a bit into the history of Taekwondo as well. And if I'm honest with you, I as much as I enjoyed my dissertation and I'm proud of it, I kind of wish I delved a bit deeper because I was very generic with how the history of Taekwondo started, and I don't want to say it was propaganda, but we all know, hear the story about how it started with General Choi. He learned through, Taekyon and these old ancient Korean arts. And while that is true, we also know that he was also a Shotokan karate user, and he'd done that for a bit, and has a very strong influence on Taekwondo as well.
Yeah, we mentioned that in
So
the video
yeah.
I posted recently. We were looking at like old Taekwondo perspective martial arts literature, and
Mhm.
someone mentioned that. But it seems like you're worried that you went to like baby's first Taekwondo introduction, but when you started going into
Yeah,
the questions of morals, then that sort of helped you go deeper, right?
yeah, definitely. As I said, it was interesting as well because obviously it kind of talks about like, again, we were mentioning earlier about the politics and stuff, like the whole split with the ITF. And I know they're called WT, but I still like to call them the WTF.
They did that when they
Um,
realized what the acronym stood for on the
yeah,
internet.
yeah. I hate to use the term politically correct because it really annoys me when I hear boomers talk about it. But I still prefer you call it WTF. You know what I mean? I'm an old school traditionalist like that, I suppose. But anyways, yeah, it helped me delve a bit more into Taekwondo, and just how quickly it just spread across both ITF and WTF. Even though they've got different stories of how the art started, but the way I look at it is that obviously the ITF have their own version, the WTF have their own version. I genuinely feel like there's truth in the middle of both. So that's what I delved into, and then I was looking into the philosophies as you mentioned. So with the philosophies, obviously we spoke about the Taekwondo oath and how you know you've got things like Confucius and Buddhism have played a huge part in Taekwondo and martial arts, Eastern martial arts in general. So I looked into and delved into that.
Any examples coming to mind?
Well, this is the thing. So this goes at the back of my head. So I had a couple of journal articles and books where they spoke about how Buddhism was quite prevalent. We talk about how a lot of the patterns, for example, there's a lot of religious connotations in there. For example, Dangun, the holy Dangun. I think I want to say it's either Yogak or Tegay, in which obviously Confucius was quite influential in the creation of um, that pattern. But one thing that did stick out for me as well was not so much Taekwondo related. It has been a while, so forgive me, but it was either boxing or MMA. And they did a study in which they tested the aggressiveness and stuff like that. I think they delved in a bit with Christianity as well. So I looked into that study as well, and I remember the study was talking about how they use the philosophies of Christianity, the general philosophies and the general stuff like in terms of self-defense, fighting for the weak, justice, etc. And then obviously there was another group in which they didn't really have any of that, and it turned out that spoilers, the people who didn't have those philosophies installed in them were far more aggressive than the other group.
Seen more as a
Um,
combat art as opposed to a self-defense art, which personally I feel like the Venn diagram is very overlappy, but a lot of people differentiate the
it's
two.
very much so. I mean, the thing about it is that it's not as black and white as people think, and I think martial arts in general, not just its philosophies. I just think it's in general, it's not as black and white as people like to claim it is.
Everyone likes
There's
to
so
think
much
they're
gray
right.
area. Yeah, exactly. exactly, but that's not the case. So I did a little bit of book research into that, but then obviously what I had to do in turn of that research was, okay, that's cool. Obviously, you've got the Taekwondo oath as well. You got the values that stem from Buddhism and old Korean and Far Eastern religions. Even like I know that Buddhism started in India. There was obviously a lot of values that come from India into places like China and Korea, etc. Just thought I'd throw that in. So my goal then after that was trying to find out, okay, we got all these values and philosophies. We talk about fighting for justice, fighting for good, not being the aggressor, adhering to the Taekwondo oath. Is that still relevant in the 21st century? And the way I had to find out if that was the case or not was basically interview a group of martial artists. And it wasn't necessarily black belts. It could be, I mean, I interviewed one of my mates who was a white belt. I interviewed one who was I believe he was a red belt or a red tag. Somebody was a green stripe. I interviewed a couple of black belts. I interviewed my instructor. I interviewed a couple others from another club in Liverpool that I was going to as well. So it was quite a mixture of people that I interviewed, and it was very interesting getting the answers that they did. I remember my mate who runs a club in Liverpool, and I remember just interviewing him, and I was absolutely, I wouldn't say I was floored, but I was kind of amazed by the answers that he gave, like how he really delved into the philosophies of Taekwondo, how he spoke about the Taekwondo oath. He recited it word for word, um, which was great for me because it
I've
really
never been
kind of
able to
helped me.
learn it. I know like a few words of each of it, but every time they ask you
I
to
know a
like
few words of it.
present it, I don't know it.
Yeah, yeah. I think I got the Taekwondo book on my desk actually. I'll try and get it in a second. But when I used to train with Master JM over in Birmingham, he would then occasionally get us to recite the Taekwondo oath, and it was very formal. He was quite by the book with it, which I kind of appreciated and respect. But that stuff like that really really I just found great. And again, common theme was, why did you get into martial arts and stuff like that, and that was something else that I kind of mentioned in my dissertation prior, was the whole kung fu craze and how Bruce Lee and kind of got the ball rolling with that, and other actors came on board and had such a massive profound influence in especially a lot of you know certain cities, working class cities like Birmingham, Liverpool, Sheffield,
Definitely.
Manchester, etc. A lot of people just watched these movies, took up Taekwondo, Kung Fu, took up all these other arts. And the coolest thing, another interesting thing for me was that a lot of these people kind of had the same mindset that I did. Was that, yeah, they do the art, they love the art, they respect it, and no, it's they're not gonna go out there and start showing off or boasting to people or well, you hope that's not the case anyways. You just got to take it at face value.
Hmm.
But no, at the same time, from what I was gathering, it seemed very, very genuine, because they've been doing it a lot longer than me. And I've also happened to know them as well. So whether that's bias, I don't know. Which actually I kind of mentioned in the dissertation. But that being said, I wasn't surprised by the answers I got in terms of how it kind of affected their lives, in the sense of like it's changed their outlook a bit, or they've already had that outlook and it's kind of reinforced it, and it's made their experience that more enjoyable, and they're far and more passionate about training, you know. I think I interviewed about 13, 14 people. I think out of that, 10 maybe 11 are still doing it.
Did you see any trends when you spoke to people of different either ranks or people of different generations? Because I know when you talk about the reason a lot of people got into martial arts generationally, there's quite a nice clean divide where you have the people who were into Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and all the action movies. Then you have the
Yeah,
people who are more into like more modern video games or influencers. I know that there's a what is it? Is it Tekken that has a character
yeah,
called Gaebek and Hwarang, which literally are
yeah,
taekwondo figures, and their
yeah,
patterns
yeah,
named after them.
yeah.
Personally, I was a big
Um,
anime geek, so that helped me.
no, I mean that's interesting as well. I think that did get mentioned. Some of them were kind of my age. You know what I mean? And not just that. Some of them as well were part of families that had done martial arts too. So that was a trend that I noticed. Well, so as I said, my mate who runs a club in Liverpool, his dad was a martial artist. He did judo, as a matter of fact, and then he switched to taekwondo, and he and his brother kind of followed the trend. So that was one thing that I heard. His wife didn't do. I don't know if she did any martial arts before. She may have. Don't quote me on it, but she would actually follow suit. I had one of my mates who trained with me at my main instructor and at my mates, and she kind of followed suit for her friends, and she got involved in that way, and she became a very successful fighter and sparrer. There was quite different trends in sense of why they got into it, which kind of became the popular theme was that Bruce Lee was a massive influence. There was this whole family, the family tradition, so to speak. Video games, I believe, got mentioned quite a bit as well, but I always felt that was kind of all interwoven amongst it, because you know, once they were getting into it, they kind of were watching action films, martial arts films, and I think that kind of reinforced it as well. And it's kind of similar to my journey because I was first thing I watched of martial arts was Power Rangers.
Everyone talks
Fan
about
of
Power
Power
Rangers.
Rangers.
I haven't actually
Yeah,
seen any Power Rangers shows, but I've seen clips since I follow one of the Red Rangers on Instagram. He's called Big Bang Mike, I think. He seems like he is a really cool guy, but it's like he described it as a jumping off platform for stunt actors to get into their career
yeah,
as Power Rangers.
yeah, yeah. It's a very low budget film. In fact, funny you mentioned that. I One of the actors who was in Power Rangers for one season, he said the reason he took the job was just so he can get into law school. Because as I say, it's an extremely cheap job. They don't get paid a lot, and I mean, even that's a whole new story. In terms of the exploitation and stuff like that. But yeah, there was a few actors there that were actually legitimate martial artists. So there was a guy called Austin St. John who played the Red Ranger. And there was a guy who sadly is no longer here. His name is Jason David Frank. And he played the Green Ranger, and he was actually one of the longest service actors of the show. So they kind of was like, oh man, these guys look cool. They can perform these really awesome moves, and they wear these really badass suits and everything. But what made me really want to do martial arts and made me, as sad as this sounds, want to pretend that I was kicking 10 people's ass at one go was watching Enter the Dragon.
No, that
And
doesn't sound sad. I like that.
watching Enter the Dragon for the very first time, I was 7 years old, and that got me wanting to do martial arts. And like, funnily enough, now that we're talking about stuff like that, kung fu films, video games like Tekken and Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, which I played when I was young, which, I mean, if I had children, I wouldn't let them play it, but here we are. Um, but I kind of noticed that a lot of these people who started martial arts kind of had a similar thing to me, where, like, you know, there's another popular martial arts film called Bloodsport with Van Damme. I remember watching that when I was younger, and I was like, I'm going to be like Van Damme. Again, as I said, Enter the Dragon. There was a Jackie Chan film called Snake and Crane, Arts of Shaolin. So a lot of the reasons why I got into it, I found in these people. Another actually popular trend as well, which kind of I think goes across the whole board of sports, was that they just wanted to get fit. You know what I mean? I think they tried a couple of stuff. It just wasn't working for them. They got into martial arts just to help with their fitness because I've always felt it's one of the toughest things to do. You know, not just taekwondo. I just think martial arts in general
Mm.
is tough. It is extremely tough. It's it's so physically and mentally demanding because you're doing something. You're doing unnatural things. You know, you are doing unnatural things, but there's a sense of achievement on doing that. If you can perform like a psychic, which you didn't were able to do beforehand, that's massive for you, you know. So that was something that I also got from the dissertation. And like I said, funnily enough, I didn't really hear much about bullying, you know, which
Okay.
was actually quite surprising.
Because it's people like to
Um,
market their martial arts club as like help your kid get strong, build confidence, and like a lot of
yeah.
kids get into it because their parents see the kids getting bullied and they drop them off at class. But no, you're right. I really haven't heard a huge amount about that. I know maybe one person who says they got into it because of that.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a bit of bullying, and that's part of the reason why I took up martial arts. Quite funny enough, there's a very popular martial artist in Liverpool. I remember him talking about uh bullying and stuff like that, and I don't want to quote him verbatim, but he did seem quite offish about it, and I was like thinking about it. I know that's something that I've heard certain people say, but when I was doing the dissertation, that's something that I didn't come across. But again, at the beginning of this podcast, I was saying like one of the cool things about the question that I put was it can lead to so many open-ended questions, and that would be something that I would like to look into. Is like the link of bullying, going and doing martial arts. I mean, because that's something you see in movies. Like I watched one of the Rocky films.
Yeah.
Um, his son learns boxing because he was getting bullied, and he was doing boxing and he beat his bullies up. Karate Kid is probably the best example of that.
Yeah.
So that's something that I would like to, again, that's one of the many things that I would like to delve into. But I think that's cool because that kind of does link into the whole philosophies, you know what I mean? Because again, you look into, and as you know, we always talk about self-defense and how we should always champion justice and we should always fight for the weak. You know,
Hmm.
you start off weak because you've been bullied, and then now that you've got this power, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. Have you ever heard that line? You
Definitely.
know,
Uh,
yeah. So do you kind of get that? You kind of have that question to yourself and think, okay, then now that I have the ability to at least quote unquote defend myself, do I help defend myself against the people who were bullying me? And then what do I do on top of that?
and at
Do
what
I
point does
just
it become
leave
the
it
reverse?
exactly? Do I leave it at that, or am I like, okay, sod this, man? I've beaten up the toughest people in the school or whatever it may be. You know,
I
where's
almost was
where
like,
does it stop? So there's so many, it's so many cool avenues, and that's one of the reasons why I was super happy about the dissertation that I did, because even that towards the end, I mean, I'm jumping the gun a little bit. That was something that um I was talking about and kind of recommended, so to speak.
I almost have something that's like the opposite. So I'm curious on your opinion of this. So I didn't get into martial arts because I was bullied. I just found it interesting. And when my instructor came and did like a demo, I was like, I'm going to do that. But after I got involved in taekwondo, that was when, because kids are mean. Kids are just looking for something that makes you different so they can jump on it because it's like the only thing that deviates from their routine. So it's interesting. So once it
Hmm.
got out that I did martial arts, that's when people started being weird about it. And it wasn't so much in primary school, it was more in high school when I'd been training since I was maybe 8 years old. So this is a long
Yeah,
time in my life I'd already been training, so it didn't like come up in regular conversation very often because it
yeah,
was just a default part of my life. It wasn't something I told people very much.
yeah.
But when people did find out in high school that I did martial arts, then they started being like, "Oh, are you a badass?" Because I was like a proper SWAT. I am like the geek who's in top set for everything.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they were like, "No way, you're like athletic and can do stuff. Oh, I'm gonna beat you up." And it actually, I'm not gonna say escalated because it wasn't like a big penultimate thing, but there was this one kid who would not drop it. And I remember mentioning one time, like he was pretending to show genuine interest in what I was talking about, because I was talking to a friend about the class I'd been to the night before and how I'd like learned knife hand guarding, block or something, knife hand. And he very selectively was like, "Oh, have you got a knife, Debbers? Have you got a knife?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." And he just kept pushing me to the point where he went, "Oh, you're going to stab me with your knife," when it's like my knife hand technique. So I just sort of muttered under my breath, like, "Oh, I wish I could," because it was like a bad day for me. And then that got me in trouble with the teacher. She was like, "Oh, Georgia." And then she like had to call the pastoral team. She had to call a bunch of other staff members who like deal with disciplinary stuff. And I was just there crying. Like, I was talking about my hobby with like my knife hand technique, and everyone has just elected to ignore what I was actually saying because this one kid was like, "Oh, you're gonna stab me then," because he thought he was cool. So that was like a really weird day for me. But then we actually, in PE, we went on a rotation. Like, you would do a sport and another sport for a term, and then you would swap with a group, and then you all went through the system throughout the year. And when it got to the self-defense rotation for my group, there was a karate instructor, and they were like, "Has anyone done martial arts before?" I was like, "Hello, taekwondo here." And then I was the demo dummy for that entire term. Immediately, any comment like that was gone. And it stopped, like, the second I threw a single technique in that room, and it just made its way throughout the entire school. And I just thought that was so weird. So I don't understand people who get bored of themselves like that.
No, that's fine. I mean, I've get that. You know, and again, we mentioned Tekken, for example. I'll give you an example. Like, one of my best mates, funny enough, he did martial arts, which I always find hilarious. So we were playing Tekken, and Warang, one of the cool things about him is that you could do like double, triple, four side kicks, etc. You know what I mean? And he was doing all of these tricks and stuff, and he was like, and my mate's like, "Oh, I bet you can't do that. You can't do that. I've never seen you do that." You know, and I was like, "Okay, probably whatever." You know what I mean? Bearing in mind, I think I was just about a year and a half into doing it. You know, and actually, quite funnily enough, I remember one of the first pics I ever took of me performing. It was a jumping reverse turning kick on a bag, and I took a photo of that. And I remember some of the comments, and somebody said to me, "It's like, Francis, you, that was you." I was like, "Yeah." It's like, "Really?"
Everyone thinks you're faking until you're not, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
What did you think I was doing this whole time?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and I've had comments, people talking about, you know, "Oh, well, can Taekwondo do well against this art? Can Taekwondo do well against that? Can, you know, I want to do boxing instead. I think boxing's a superior martial art." And to be fair, it does kind of get like an eye roll, you know what I mean? They'll be like, "Oh, can you show me a kick or show me a punch?" Or, you know, blah, blah, blah.
People are
I
convinced
had it a
Taekwondo
bit,
doesn't have hand
yeah.
techniques.
I mean, I didn't have it that much, funnily enough, at uni, you know. But funnily enough, I didn't have it much at sixth form because we had such a close unit of people, and not a lot of people knew I did taekwondo, so it didn't really get around me doing that. But I do recall, like, as I said, it happened a bit at uni, and when I, you know, different workplaces, you know, I worked at a retail shop at one point, and when I told them that I was doing taekwondo, they were like, "Oh, okay, you do that, you do this, da da da. You know, can you show me this? Can you show me that? You know." And as I said, I had people who have no martial arts experience at all say that it won't work on the streets or won't work on that, and I'm just looking at them, I'm like, "God, give me strength, please."
On the
They don't know
streets,
what
they
I'm
just
talking
see
about.
red, don't they?
Yeah, you know. It's like my sister's like, "I don't think you could beat me up." And I was like, "Why do you think that?" Because, you know, because when I get angry, you don't know how I'm like. And I'm like,
Getting angry
you
is
think
not
I'm gonna,
even really the
think I'm gonna
goal.
wait that long for you for you to get angry? You know, you do know martial arts, part of it is about deception and doing things as quickly as possible and by any means necessary. You know, these are the things that people don't know. And I think a lot of it comes from a lack of ignorance and just blatant disrespect at the same time. But like you said with your example, once you show a technique, it's all of a sudden, it's like, all right, I'm sorry, I'll shut my mouth. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
I
It's like it's like something is daring them, and it's like, again, like I said, it's just comes out of naivety, ignorance, and some of it is just disrespect.
Yeah, and I have no desire to walk around just like fighting people all the time just to prove that I have a level of competency in this thing that I've trained in the majority of my life. I have no need for it, but it's like
Yeah.
other people come seeking it. So whenever you get like a little jab like that, I'm not religious even a little bit, like not at all. But I find myself sort of repeating the five tenets of taekwondo in my head as like a mantra almost, and that's like, all right, they're
Yeah.
just being stupid, don't worry about it. Because like for the audience, if you don't know, the five tenets of taekwondo are courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. Well, I'm
Yeah.
curious, while you're doing your dissertation interviews with people who did like other arts, do they have similar stuff in other arts like the tenets, or is it just sort of the vibes?
I wouldn't say the vibes, because again, a lot of these people had been doing taekwondo probably far longer than they did other martial arts. So I didn't really delve too much into their experience with other fighting styles for the people that I spoke to, anyways. And I'm glad that you've mentioned the five tenets, because I feel even ignorant of that. But that was something that I mentioned in the dissertation, and that was another trend that got past that I saw throughout all of the interviews that I made. You know what I mean? That was something that people were able to recite verbatim, just like you did. And again, they talk about how martial arts had helped them with their self-control, with the aggression, and as you say, the integrity, in terms of, well, I'm not going to go out there and do something stupid like, can you show me a technique, please? Can you show me how to do like a 540 spinning roundhouse hook kick back kick, please? And I'm like,
Yeah,
I
mate,
have the
that's day
integrity to be
one.
like, look, yeah, like, look, man, I just want to have my food, man. All right, can I just go in peace? You know. So I just exaggerated it, but no, the five tenets was something that got mentioned quite often, and it was something that, as I said, like even back when I was doing it, like at uni, that was always something that was drilled, in my head. Like, yeah, I wouldn't say I had anger issues, but I did have a bit of an aggressiveness, and it was like, okay, cool. This is something, and I think this was something, again, like I said, we mentioned self control. That was one of the things that got mentioned a bit. This was something that could help them take that aggressiveness and turn it into something positive. You know what I mean? That was another cool trend. And again, that kind of helps with the whole philosophies and stuff like that, because you've got a reason now to use that aggression or anger, but you're not doing it in a way that you're hurting people per se. And I use that term very lightly, because we tend to hurt people.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's unfortunate. That's not intentional,
Hmm.
but it is. It's not intentional at all. But no, it was things like that is what got I kind of across the board, and that again, it was like, looking back now in retrospect, it was kind of like something that's, oh man, that kind of inflicts on me as well. Like, you know, I can have that helps with self control, and even the gym. You know what I mean? Going to the gym and lifting weights. That kind of helped with my self control and my aggression and stuff like that, because you can utilize that. Your endorphins get released and everything like that, and you feel happy afterwards. I mean, I was so happy at one point when I was training with my main instructor in Liverpool, that I used to go there in very cold, wet nights, and I'd come out and I'd be like, yo, it's roasting like it is today. Like,
Yeah.
I would feel like I'm in 31 degrees outside, and I'm like, I could actually walk, around with just a t-shirt, and we're talking like 2 degrees weather here,
Mm.
Sorry to go off tangent, but yeah, that was just a
No,
bit
no,
of
go
my
ahead.
my experience. But yeah, the five tenants probably was something that was spoken about just as much as other aspects of their life, and how it impacted them for the better, I have to stress.
And that was one of the trends that you found like for everybody? Was there any like weird
Yeah,
outliers?
100%.
Did you come across any
No,
psycho
no.
who was like, "Oh, I'm just so hyped to completely beat people up"? Because that I've heard the theory a lot recently. Like people on Facebook talk about it a lot, where they say, "Oh, it doesn't actually make you a good person. It exacerbates the inherent personality you already have." So some people will
And
go into
yeah,
martial arts to like placate a power complex almost.
And that was again fun, and again that's something that wasn't there, but that was something that I didn't mention. I said to myself, I said in the dissertation, I said like one of the key things that I've noticed was even though there was this trend where they take the philosophies and the tenets very strongly, it was only 13, 14 people that I interviewed. You know, the scope could have been a lot bigger. And if it was a lot bigger, that's something that it may be a case where I could have spoken to somebody and they'd be like, yeah, I just do it just for the sake of it. You know, it's actually quite funny you would talk about that because as I mentioned, one of my mates who did kickboxing and he used to go to the tournaments. And he told me the one time, think to myself, should I say this? But he went to a competition the one time, and apparently somebody had taken some recreational drug. I'm not going to say what exactly it was, but he took it before he went into a what's it called, sparring somebody in a tournament. I was like, that's mental. You know what I mean? But you know, again, like I said, one of the cool things about a dissertation is that you can leave open-ended questions, and that's another question that I said, you know, expand the scope in terms of the personnel that you can interview, and maybe you come across that, and maybe that can challenge my perception, the question in hand, and you know, response like general, and the reason as well that you know stuff like that and the people that I interviewed, the reason why I have such pride into it is because you know, going back to what you're saying about how it helps exacerbates our personalities, etc. Is my sister is a Jehovah Witness and she's very black and white in terms of what they can and can't do. And they look at martial arts in general as nope, can't do it because essentially it equals to violence, you know.
Don't tell them
And
about the Crusades, but yeah.
yeah, you know. And I remember I tried to explain that to her. I wanted to get my niece into martial arts, not even just taekwondo, just like any fighting style. I wanted you to do it because it would help. And there's that phrase I'm going to use: defend herself. You know, not that she ever got bullied, but it would be, you know, something that's quite useful for her in the future, on top of great fit for fitness, great for flexibility, you know, socializing, etc., etc. All those key buzzwords that a lot of instructors like to do when they're advertised, you know what I mean? Come join us, you know, you could do X, Y, and Z, A, B, C, etc., etc. I'm proud of the fact that the dissertation was used because it was something that you could use to counteract those type of things. You know, the fact that we got to mention religion, not just Buddhism, but Christianity and stuff like that as well. And, you know, again, open-ended questions. We could talk about other religions as well, Islam, Sikhism, Hinduism, etc., and their views on martial arts as well, which I'd be very intrigued
It's the difference
to look at.
between being harmless and being peaceful, isn't it? If you're peaceful, you're electing to not hurt anyone. If you're harmless, then you have no means of stopping it if someone comes to you with ill intent.
Yeah, yeah. Or you could be again both, you know. I like to think I'm a pacifist for the most part. I try to talk my way out of things, you know, and settle things, you know, and then if the worst comes to the worst, not that I've, you know, fortunately have come across any bad situations that I can't explain. That's my outlook on life. But I'm also proud of the fact that, you know, I know that I'm not indestructible. And I know that I'm not the I'm not, you know, the goat. I'm not Muhammad Ali or Bruce Lee or whoever it may be.
We
But
wish one day.
yeah, don't we all? But you know, I would also like to think that I am quite capable of defending myself and holding my own in a fight. But ultimately, that's not something that I would like to go out and do. You know what I mean? You know, because again, I can't speak for everybody, but I can only speak for my own experience. It's just long, and it's like you start thinking about other things like your family and your friends and stuff like that. All this that it comes down to, and you know, the back end effects of what happens, etc. So interesting concept in terms of being peaceful and being harmless. I think a lot of the martial artists, and I think we kind of romanticize it as well. We think that they are peaceful because that's what they like to promote, and again, the philosophies, the 5 tenets of Taekwondo, the Taekwondo oath, and just the values and the philosophies of all martial arts across. That's what they like to promote. We're peace loving people. What we like to do is we promote this fighting style, but we're not going out there to intentionally harm people. That can happen at the same time. I guess I'm just rambling on, but yeah.
No, I'm happy to hear it. One question I do have is, you come at this from a very philosophical standpoint, but your overarching dissertation was, is it still applicable in the modern day? So what comparisons did you make between historical contexts of martial arts, the current day, and possibly going into the future? Did you explore how the mentality has shifted over time at all?
Good question. That was that was the grand scheme of things, and ultimately, it seemed from what I got from the information I gathered that the mindset was still there. So people still looked at it and thought, nope, this is just important now. I mean, this was 2011, but this was still important now in, say, for example, 2025 than it was in 1955 or 1465. So these people that I interviewed still had the looked at those values and looked at the philosophy and realized that that makes a big impact on their life. This strong sense of positivity, this strong sense of being a peaceful person, And to be honest with you, they are quite peaceful people. They are nice people. They're not aggressive. They don't go out there to harm people and whatnot. But that being said, I think because obviously the dissertation was done, quite a long time ago, and obviously we're in 2025 now, with how things have happened over taekwondo associations and stuff like that. You know, it'd be interesting to look at how they view, if they still view it now, because obviously politics and corruption and stuff like that plays its part. But back then, I think we all kind of agreed that it's still relevant, it's still important. They still hold General Choi to high regard. The guy who is considered the creator of Taekwondo. I'm hoping I'm answering the question.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, oh, you think so? But no, that's what I kind of gathered. It didn't seem to me where there was a change of shift in terms of, you know, um, anything in terms of like going slightly out of the bounds of the tenets of Taekwondo, if that makes sense. Nothing for me to say like the 5 tenets isn't important in 2011 or the 21st century, when as a matter of fact, it probably is. And I think it, it, a lot of these people work with kids, so they use those tenets and those philosophies, and they drill it into their students.
Instill the
You
next
know,
generation.
yeah, exactly. So I've like to. It's not even that I like to think. I know that they still look at it as this important part of the martial arts or the taekwondo, and it's still going to be relevant for the next 100 years. Now, has there been a change of view in terms of what's happened in terms of their experience of how they've been treated by people who claim to hold these values, but yet treating them differently for whatever reason that may be? That would be very interesting to look at. That wasn't something that had happened beforehand, but it'd be very interesting to look into and delve into, if like I did like a continuation or a
Drop the
follow-up
sequel, come on.
dissertation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The long-awaited sequel, man. It's currently in development hell, as they say in Hollywood.
Well, I feel like that's a nice, like, rounded place for us to stop for now. Is there anything that we haven't discussed yet or touched on that you really want to mention?
Not necessarily. I mean, I hope, as I said, I hope I've answered the questions that you've seeked, and I hope that this has been an engaging conversation.
I mean, I've had
Um,
fun.
yeah, I mean, I've just rambled on and on and on. I'm kind of glad that I did it because it kind of brings back memories in terms of when I was younger and how fit I was and how dedicated I was and how, I kind of lived by those, by, courtesy, integrity, self-control, indomitable spirit and perseverance. It brings back some good happy memories. And, you know, I've got back into Taekwondo back in 2022. I just want to continue on with something that I love doing and something that's been a part of my life for a very long time. And, hopefully I get to be like, the people that I interviewed and continue training the next generation and using those values and philosophies and showing that it's still relevant in the 21st century.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Is there anything you want to promote while you're here? Any clubs you want to plug? Anything?
Okay, I'll probably plug a few. I'll probably plug Liverpool Taekwondo, which is Master Roger Lawrence. He's been my main instructor for years. I want to do a shout out to Master Chris Davis over at Liverpool as well. I trained with him.
He's a cool guy.
Yeah, so I trained with him. I trained under him as well. And I do a shout outs as well at Black Country Martial Arts Association too, Mr. Mike Lewis. Brilliant instructor, brilliant club. And I said this to somebody. I said it, training with them kind of feels like how it was when I was in Liverpool when I was training at Rogers and going to Chris's occasionally, where like I could have, the whole week of going to Taekwondo and everybody just there's a real huge family vibe there. It kind of feels like one massive club together, and it's like, man,
I do like getting to stop down there for squad.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun doing squad there.
Okay, if that is everything we wanted to discuss, I'm going to say thank you everyone for watching. If you want to guest on with respect, then fill out the form in the description below and we'll hopefully get you booked in ASAP. Like, comment, subscribe, all that normal generic YouTube stuff. Have a nice day. Goodbye.